little silos and we don't like to talk to each other because we view people in different kinds of racing as competition for the same money, whether it's sponsor dollars, whether it's fans. During the pandemic, we learned that if we don't work together, we're going to be defeated. And our panelists here are a great example of folks that, in their own ways, found ways to cross boundaries, get along, and really, for the good of our sport, kept things going. And just as Dr. Jamie Meyer showed us the outlook for 2021, if these gentlemen had not done what they have done in 2020, I think we would be looking at a more bleak future than we have right now. So having said that, we're going to introduce the panel, and again, in alphabetical order. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. Are we missing a panelist, or do we have everybody here?
They're all there. You can give it a go. We just have to scroll over, but they're all in attendance.
I see a different name than I was expecting. That's what's really here.
That's Chris as an alias. Chris Blair as an alias.
Okay, Chris. My goodness, you want to scare me. I didn't recognize you because with my eyesight, I can't see who everybody is until the big picture pops up. So we're going to start alphabetically with Chris Blair, who's operating under an alias today.
Yeah, I'm borrowing a computer today for this one. So now it's a pleasure being here today, guys. Again, I had a great time the last couple of years at the Racetrack Business Conference. So it's a great honor to be here today, especially joining the group that we're on here with.
Our next panelist needs no introduction, so I'm just going to let him introduce himself. Mr. Tom Deary, it has been a pleasure to know various members of the Deary family, and you guys have done so much in racing, and I'm really glad of this new position you have with PRI. I think it's outstanding. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone, and my name is Tom Deary, and what a great panel we have assembled today to talk about a very topical subject. So I'm pretty excited to talk about that. And we always hear how we're going to come out of this thing. Well, we are. We're going to come out with the engine wide open and smoking our tires.
Very good indeed. Christian, you're next up.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be part of this group today. My name is Christian Robinson. I work government affairs for SEMA PRI. It's been a wild year, that's for sure, but I've had the pleasure of working with many of you and with Tom directly as we deal with the challenges that COVID has brought, and look forward to taking some of the lessons that we've learned over the past year and improving the standing of racing with government officials and working together to make sure we achieve common goals once things normalize.
Welcome aboard, Christian. Sean, you're next up.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm Sean Stewart. I'm the Executive Director of the United States Motorsports Association, and we're an organization that exists for the purpose of this topic. This is why we're around. So big thanks to you, Dennis and Tim, for going forward with this event. We know events in general are hard to go forward with this year. You probably could have just as easily not done it. So thanks to you guys, and just looking forward to sitting on this panel with all the other guys here. We work in some capacity with everybody here. Tom and I have been meeting regularly and trying to do what we can here to get this industry reopened. So I think, Tom, you're up on lunch. I think it's your turn.
If you're buying, Tom, I'm going to sit in on that lunch for sure. And Sean, the idea of not having a racetrack business conference is not something that we could tolerate. So the virtual version is certainly what we needed to do this year. Okay, Chris, the first question is going to go to you. And again, we're going to go round robin alphabetically. What did we learn this year working together to coordinate efforts with government officials to deal with the COVID restrictions that we could apply going forward to what I hopefully will be a normal year next year?
I think the one thing that we learned right off the bat is most of our government officials didn't really know what we do or the impact that we have on our local communities. That was one of the things that came out right away, and we found ourselves having to scramble to assemble information to pass along to these various groups. The light really popped on for us when we saw that some other events and activities that were getting approval, at least in the state of Illinois, such as the drive-in movie theater owners, they immediately got their place at the table. And in conversations with some different local politicians, we discovered the reason why was because they had a lobbyist who was actively pushing for them. So that was one of the things that we looked at right away is, everybody talks about getting that seat at the table. We found that you have to knock on the door to get yourself invited to have that seat at the table. So we decided to bring everybody together and started relying on one another to see who had the best political connections. And what we found is most people were only aligned with a person of the same political party as them or with one local politician. And that was where we realized everybody needs to step out and cross all the party lines and pull everybody together to show the importance. And that was one of the main things that came out from this, was that we need to work with everybody, not just the party that we may be a member of.
Very good point indeed. Tom, you're next up.
Well, the first thing we learned is that the application of whatever restrictions or requirements that were being laid out were very inconsistent. And sometimes it changed from day to day. But the number one thing we learned, and this is page number 1 out of the every COVID toolkit you find, whether it's the one from Sean's group or whether it's the PRI group, is get to know your local people, because all of our businesses are very local. Now, yes, the spotlight does shine on the NASCAR events and the IndyCar events and NHRA, but the majority of the racetracks across this country, whether they're oval tracks or motocross or whatever, they were somehow able to operate under the spotlight. And most of that was because of relationship with their local people. And that's what it really boils down to. Page 1, item 1, I know Sean will reinforce this, is get to know who is the one that's you have to deal with in your local area, your local government.
Very good point indeed, Tom. And while Chris and Tom have been active in the trenches of racing, Christian, working with SEMA, you guys are taking that good big picture approach and have done a wonderful job over the years. Anytime something pops up as possible legislation that's going to hurt the industry, you guys have been really quick to respond. You're next up on this discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. Yeah, I would really echo what both Tom and Chris have said. I almost called him Mark because the name on the screen, but what Chris has said. But all politics are local, and like the two gentlemen said, you want to have that relationship, whether it's with your local department or your local elected officials, to make sure that you have that seat at the table when, God forbid, something like COVID happens, but even when it comes to noise ordinances or zoning restrictions that we see a lot of racetracks have, and you want to have these relationships before you need them, which is one of the biggest lessons I think we can take forward. And I think a lot of people view, especially in racing, that the government is the enemy, and especially when you get down past federal, state level, and especially down to the local level, it's just not the case. Most of these folks, it's not their day job. They do something else for a living. They're probably a member of the local chamber of commerce or other social groups, just like you are, and they want to help. And like Tom said, a lot of what we saw with COVID was regulated and interpreted at such a local level, that it wasn't state lawmakers that we were calling. They certainly could help, but it was ultimately the local health department that was making interpretations of a governor's orders that could say whether or not racetracks could open, and how they were classified. Were they lumped in with amusement parks, or were they lumped in with museums and movie theaters? We saw it across the board. And going forward, being able to educate elected officials about racing and your stature in the community will play a huge part in that, on the missions that we see going forward, and some of the topics that I described. So I think those were the biggest lessons that we probably took away from the year. It's going to be a great learning experience when we get beyond this to apply to other challenges that the industry faces going forward.
Good points, Christian. And I know in the past, when we were looking at grant money from the states, we wanted to be compared to amusement parks, and then had to fight to distance ourselves from that arrangement before. So kind of shows you to be careful of what you do to set the stage for one thing, because it could hurt you down the road. Sean, you're next up in this discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. And I echo what everyone has said. It's a local and state issue, and that's the void. The USMA saw 6 years ago when we started, was that primarily grassroots racing is connected on that state and local level. An issue in Texas or an issue in California or wherever, they can't be done on the federal level for the most part. So it's that state and local level. And like Christian said, we get so focused on national politics and how crazy they are and how much money there is. But I think it's important, to his point, to note that, we bring politicians out to racing events. Well, not so much this last year, but in the past, we brought hundreds out, and they all kind of say the same version of the same thing of, wow, I didn't know how organized this place was. I didn't know how many people would be here. Have you guys ever thought of having this event or that event, or our annual Easter egg hunt that we don't have a place for anymore? So I think it's really a perception issue. Politicians tend to perceive us a certain way. We're still perceived as loud and dangerous and dirty, and we have to do a better job of changing those perceptions, and then really becoming, and Christian said it, a prominent player in your community. You are an event facility in your community, and you're probably sitting in a rural community that doesn't have a whole lot of other entertainment going on. So we can't fear those politicians anymore. I can tell you that we started working heavily in the state of Pennsylvania 3 or 4 years ago. We have tremendous depth of relationships there. We've written floor speeches, and we have cell phone numbers of politicians. And while that state was pretty well locked down, they also continued to race, and they continue to race with fans. And that is directly attributed to those connections, those personal relationships we had. The areas where you're calling that legislator for the first time, or getting to know your health department for the first time, it was much more of a challenge. So if there's anything to be learned, it's you can't fear those people. There's a drag strip in Idaho that for the last 30 years avoided their state and local level politicians. And for the first time, they reached out, and they're having a lot of success, not just with COVID, but with all kinds of things, finding tourism money and grant money. And as we go into 2021, we're going to see money trickle down, and Christian can probably touch on this more than I can, but there's going to be stimulus money. We don't all know what that looks like, but a lot of that is going to come into the state and then come into the local level. And if you're not in that mix, not understanding what's going on there and having those relationships, you could miss out. So there's more opportunity to know those folks than there is to avoid them. And I think we've got to change that, and then get out and educate about your economics and what you mean to your community and how many racers are coming in and out. A lot of our events on the grassroots level may not be, 30 or 40 or 50,000 fans, but you might have 500 race teams in town, and that's a big deal to that small community. So just summing that up, I think what we learned is the ones who know and have relationships did well, and the ones who didn't fare as well, and we've got to change that going forward.
Very good point, Sean. And I remember a story that I covered years ago in the state of Indiana, and a local legislator in northern Indiana, who was a state rep, said that she didn't have any interest in motorsports because she wasn't in Indianapolis. She didn't have any racing economic impact in her area until she was informed that the Hoosier Tire Company was in her district. And all of a sudden, it became important to her because it was a jobs thing. And that's knowing the representatives. We have to remember that they're not always racing fans, but they can be converted because racing is a jobs program when you get right down to it. All right, Chris, we learned a lot this year. I'm sure from trial and error, you guys found what worked, you found what didn't work. What are some of the best practices to learn in how to work together? And on the flip side of that, what is the worst thing you can do if you want to get groups to work together?
Getting everyone to work together was the biggest challenge of the bunch. And as Tom Deary knows very well, it was frustrating for me at times because I would think that we were making some progress on keeping everyone on the same page. And then you'd have one person who thought they had a better system of getting things done. And next thing we know, they're off on another tangent and talking to the people that they shouldn't have been talking to. And as I like to say, Tom came in and helped clean up the mess for me because I was getting a little bit frustrated. We just really weren't getting there. So it's really trying to get the buy-in from all the other tracks that we were working with. And I think that's something the industry as a whole needs to look to, is making sure we do have that unified voice and that we're not 1,000 singular voices chipping away, and that could also get the stories crossed up and the commitments and the things that we were going to do. And that was the key both then, and I think that's going to be the key for the future. Some of the things we had looked at is how we can take this to upgrade the overall level of professionalism from everything from the 8th mile micro sprint track all the way up through to a track that hosts IndyCar races and NHRA events. Is how we can all work together to make sure that there's some consistency there. And also too, in the communication process of explaining to everyone that our revenue models are very different than other forms of sports. So that's some of the things we have to keep passing along and pressing. Again, I think in looking down the road, I saw this as an opportunity after we got through this initial hurdle, we got our tracks open. The big piece was making sure that we can kind of keep this group together, keep everybody on the same page, and start taking a look at what those next steps may be. And you touched on it. There's going to be a lot of grant money and different things that are taking place. I've been talking with our tourism commission to see if there's a way we could possibly get a motorsports program developed at the state level, and taking some of the benefits from these funds that are coming down. So there's just so many different ways we can approach this. And we're looking at it too, and working with Sean and his group. I'm also on the drag racing leadership team that they have over there. We're trying to see how we can divide this thing up and have specialty groups that we can be working in to really make some progress. So I think there's a very good potential for the future of us just staying together and working together.
Fantastic. Okay, Tom, your next step on this one.
Well, the worst thing is, we'll start with that because that requires us to look back, and we really don't need to spend much time looking back. But the worst thing I saw happen this year was the one track calling the state complaining about another track. And that was, it's countered everything that we've ever done in this, we've tried to do in this industry. But we all know that the operators of our venues are fiercely independent businessmen who oftentimes are former racers, and it's all about winning. And sometimes you got to put your competition into the wall if you're going to win. So we've been looking forward, and what we've learned is the opportunity was presented to us, and we've seen this successful, for track operators, business operators, venue operators, by working together can achieve unbelievable things. We've never really aggregated the different parts of this business into one solidified group. And I think there's some things that both Sean has started to do and things that you'll be seeing more of in the PRI front, where we're going to start doing that because we have a very powerful group. And if there's a positive, the best thing that's going to come out of this is we really learned that We can rely on each other. We can support each other. We can learn from each other. And if we work together, that makes us that much stronger.
Very good points, Tom. And I remember when a lot of the organizations that should have been working together, I'm old enough to remember when they didn't get along. So I'm glad to see that change indeed. Christian, you're next up.
Yeah, just touching on what both Chris and Tom have mentioned. I'm here in Washington D.C. There are literally coalitions and trade groups for anything and everything you could possibly imagine. And the ability for tracks to get organized and form their own coalitions to speak in a collective voice, to put their muscle together to impact change starts with an open line of dialogue. This was something someone touched on earlier, that a lot of these tracks viewed each other as competitors and had never worked together towards a common good like we saw this year. And that's really where it starts. And what we've done and attempted to do, and Sean has done the same thing with the groups he has worked with and is working with, is try to provide the tools that we have at our disposal to help amplify the voices of these tracks, whether it's providing grassroots action alerts for tracks customers to be able to and supporters to be able to contact their local elected officials, providing templates for reopening plans to submit to the state to show that we take this seriously and everyone's singing from the same sheet of music, to a willingness to, as Chris touched on this, self-police, self-regulate, that showing that we're willing to play within the rules that we've set for ourselves. And I think these are all good lessons to take forward, and the industry will only be stronger because of it going forward.
Christian, we saw great support by SEMA when it came to the RPM Act years ago. As we look forward to a change in the presidency, and it appears an influence of more of this legislation against climate change going forward, do you think we're going to have a sequel to having to fight that battle again?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Jamie Meyer mentioned this in his keynote at the top, is we know who won the presidency. We know who controls the House of Representatives. So you've got Democrats in charge of the White House and in charge of the House of Representatives. We still don't know, it's gone into overtime, so to speak, who will have control of the US Senate. And it's going to come down to two runoff elections in Georgia on January 5th. And one of the things that we've done is encourage anyone and everybody that's involved with motorsports, whether it's the fans and grassroots supporters or the track operators and sanctioning bodies, to make sure that they get out and vote, get registered to vote, request an absentee ballot, be able to look up where your polling place is. We've set up a tool at performanceracing.com/vote-racing where you can get all of that information. SEMA PRI has endorsed the two Republican candidates, the two incumbents, Senators David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, who have a history of supporting the RPM Act that you've mentioned. But if at least one of them is victorious in their race, Republicans will maintain control of the United States Senate, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will probably become the second most powerful person in Washington behind the incoming president come January 20th. The Senate will be able to check anything that the House does. Fortunately, I think we saw out of the election, the House majority for Dems shrunk, and Biden has appointed at least one or two members of the House so far to his cabinet, which has shrunk that majority even further. So it'll be really hard for anything radical, I think, to come out of Washington in the next 2 to 4 years. But it is important that people make their voices heard in Georgia. We'll be continuing to make the push to get out the vote in that state prior to the January 5th runoff elections.
Christian, thank you very much. Sean, I got a little off the subject there and took a tangent, but had to take advantage of my SEMA guy there with his knowledge of politics. Back to you on the subject at hand. What did we learn from this year that we did great? And what didn't we do so great that we don't want to try again?
I think the obvious that, that we didn't do great was we weren't as organized as we could have been heading into this pandemic. And I think what we got to be careful of is that we don't, lose sight of banding together here going forward. There's going to be something else. I mean, Christian knows more than any of us, and being around politics over the last 10 years or so, I've come to have less anxiety over it. It changes every couple of years. Politicians come and go. It's always the most important election of our time, right? And then we're on to the next one. So there'll be a new cast of characters in another 2 to 4 years, and we'll be, but we have to stay consistent in getting together. And I think the positive is that we can do that. We always sort of assume, and probably all of us on this panel have been told, oh, you can't do that. People won't get together. They won't communicate. And I'll go to Chris Blair and our drag racing leadership team. That has become an excellent group. I mean, that is a group of stakeholder track owners that are getting together, having real open discussions. There's no nonsense. There's no drama there or whatever. We're not in the weeds on issues that don't matter. It's really a coming together, and I think Tom's done a good job of getting different groups together, and Christian has, and getting information out and all that. I think it's far more positive than negative. We just have to continue the momentum into next year. And continue to grow these groupings. We launched the Motorsports Council of Pennsylvania, something we've been working on for a number of years. We've got a group coming in Ohio. We helped launch a Racing to Vote. You can go to Racing to Vote. The PRI website has some great resources as well. If you're in Georgia, you have got to go out and vote. To Christian's point, we need that wall there to just keep things somewhat normal going forward. But I think that will be the positive of COVID going forward, is that people can work together, competitors can work together, and I think all of us on this panel are proof of that, right? We all answer to our different organizations, but we've all been working together, trying to find the needs and the strengths of each of us, and that's the key. On these calls we have, on these groupings we have, everyone comes from different backgrounds, different strengths, and that's what you're bringing. You got to put yourself aside, or your own politics aside even, and really just figure out what can you contribute to the industry as a track or a business owner or whatever it may be.
Fantastic. Chris, one final word.
Well, the one thing, as Sean mentioned, that I see as some great opportunities for all of us through this coming together. And just in our drag racing leadership team meeting last week, we started looking at that future and how we can be working together on group sponsorships. And everybody's being so open with all the different things there. So again, the key message is keep it up, keep working together. And let's see what we can do to create real coalitions that can really make a change and protect this sport for the next generation.
Thank you very much, Chris. Tom, before I give you a chance to say the final word, I just want to say thank you for all the support that you've given to Tim and I in the Racetrack Business Conference from day one. Having people like yourself involved with this year in, year out is the reason that we're still here today. Tom, one final word. Wrap us up.
Thank you, Dennis. And yes, it's important that all of us support our industry programs like RTBC, and it's an honor to be part of this and have actually been a part of it since the beginning. I think really the wrap up today is we all should be very bullish about 2021. I think we have a great opportunity. We have shown, we meaning the motorsports industry, not, NASCAR has shown and IndyCar has and NHRA, they did their thing and it was very successful. But really from the grassroots level, whether it's the small dirt track or the motocross track or the drag strip, we've really shown what tough individual and hardworking people we are that have been faced unbelievable odds this year in a lot of places, overcame them and put on, we survived. In some places we succeeded. And that kind of footprint that kind of direction is just going to springboard us into 2021. Man, if they can throw this at us and we can come out of the other side, look out, baby, because here comes motorsports.
Fantastic, Tom. I love that pep talk too. Christian.
Yeah, all for one and one for all, I think is the mantra. And I think, you know, COVID's been terrible. It's impacted a lot of people personally and a lot of businesses, but the lessons learned over the course of 2020 will only make the industry stronger and build its political muscle going forward.
Sean, wrap us up.
Yeah, well said by everybody. Get involved in your community. Don't fear your local politicians and your local and state level. Get out, build those relationships. And if you don't know how to do that or how to go about that, that's okay. All of us on this panel are here to help, whether you contact PRI or go to our website or give us a call. We're here to help. We've got tons of resources to walk you through those relationships, and it's not as scary and as chaotic as it seems, and it will pay off. It will pay off financially. It'll pay off through all kinds of ways you don't even see right now. I could spend all day telling you stories of just making those connections, getting state and local level politicians out to your events, inviting them in, educating them, how that has reaped benefits. I can't tell you one time that's been a negative.
Fantastic group, guys. Fantastic discussion. I know we're over time. We're going to head to break now, but we are going to be back at 10:45 on time and on target for our Racing Toward the Future panel. Guys, thank you so much for your discussion here today on the Racetrack Business Conference.